Going over CP or IRS notice CP501K. This is a notice that you might receive from the IRS if you have unpaid taxes. So in this case, this is from a form 1040NR. So we'll just go with that. We'll go through this notice, what it means, what it might mean to you. We'll talk about where you can get more information from the IRS website. But before we begin with the notice, I want to point your attention to two things at the top of the notice itself. So the first is in the upper right hand corner, you'll see some information there. The notice, the type of notice it is, the tax year. So in this case, it's for tax year 2017. The notice date is August 10th, 2018. Your taxpayer ID, which you should verify for accuracy, and a contact phone number. So probably the more important thing about this section up here is the notice date, because if there's any expected action item, for example, paying your unpaid taxes, then there's going to be a timeline associated with the notice date. So we'll keep our eyes open for anything that says, please pay this amount within so many days of the notice date, and we'll circle back to the notice date so that we can kind of capture that moment. But generally speaking, when the IRS is expecting you to take action on something, then there's only a certain period of time from the notice date, not necessarily from the time that you receive the notice. So that brings me to point number 2, which is you should always make sure that your taxpayer name and address field on the left-hand side is accurate. So if you've recently moved or relocated, then you may want to update your address of record with the IRS. So normally when you file your tax return, the IRS will update your tax record with your most recent address listed on your tax return. But if you're in between tax filing seasons, you may want to call the 800 number and change your address over the phone. Or if you don't like that thought of sitting on hold for a long time and going through the phone tree, you can always file the official change of address form. So for regular taxpayers, that would be IRS Form 8822. If you're a business owner, it would be IRS Form 8822-B. So any of the forms that we mentioned here, we'll put links in the show notes to resources where you can learn a little bit more about them. Now let's take a closer look at this notice. So in this case, it says our records show you have unpaid taxes for the year ending December 31st, 2017 from a form 1040NR. The total is $95.33 and 53 cents. It includes a failure to pay penalty and interest charges. So if you have an installment agreement or a payment agreement in place, then you should just continue. You don't need to pay attention to this notice. Sometimes these notices are automatically generated, and sometimes the auto generation doesn't catch certain statuses, like if you've already paid your balance in full within the past 21 days, or you've made alternate payment arrangements, then you can disregard the notice. And finally, there's another note. If you're a debtor in a bankruptcy case, then this is for your information only. The IRS respects the bankruptcy process. So there's generally a stay of collection while that process plays out. And you don't need to worry about another notice if you're going through bankruptcy. On the bottom of page 1, if you wanted to just mail a check or a money order, you can do that. You would cut this payment voucher off the bottom of the form or the notice. You would mail it to the IRS at this address here. I always tell people that they should make payments to the payment address here on the voucher. Sometimes it's the same as the address up here on the letterhead, but I've seen notices where they are two completely different IRS offices in two different cities. So when in doubt, always just go with the address on the payment voucher. So what you should do is make your check or money order payable to the U.S. Treasury. You would write your tax ID number, either for this case, if it's a 1040 NR, it would be your individual taxpayer identification number, the tax year, and then the form number 1040 NR. If you're a 1040 filer, then it would be your social security number and form 1040. Put that on the check or the money order, and then include everything in this. Put it in your envelope, and then address it to this ECS support stop 5050 in Kansas City. So here are action items that you need to take on quickly. So you can mail that. You can also pay online on the IRS website. The IRS has an additional note saying that if we notified you that we suspended the enforced collection on your account because of a financial hardship, then you don't need to do anything. So if you have another notice that says that they've suspended the collections process because of your financial situation, then this notice, you can probably set it aside in your records. There are payment options. You can set up an installment agreement. A lot of times you can go to the IRS website and go through an automated process. I believe that is good for balances less than $25,000. Sometimes you may need to file the installment agreement request form. That's IRS form 9465. Again, we'll put a link in the show notes to resources we've created on that. Offer and compromise. So this is basically an offer to pay less than what you owe. And if the IRS believes that that's good enough, then they may accept that because the alternative may be spending a lot of money with little expectation of getting much back. But please be advised that if the IRS is going to settle for a lot less than what they feel they're rightfully owed, they're going to make sure that you're not sandbagging them. And this can be a pretty arduous process. It definitely can feel like an invasion of privacy at times because they're going to want you to disclose everything about your financial situation. And if there's something that you don't like that the IRS says is an option, they're probably going to pursue that option before accepting your offer and compromise. And then they'll accept the offer and compromise once they've exhausted all options to get every possible penny out of you as possible. So it's not necessarily a comfortable process. This section right here talks about the next steps in the collections process, filing a federal tax lien. You can request an appeal under the collection appeals program before that tax lien is filed. You can either call the 800 number or you can send a collection appeals request. That's IRS form 9423. So you can send that within 30 days of the date of the notice. So go back up here, 30 days of August 10th. That makes it somewhere around September 9th, 2018. If you account for mail, you probably want to make sure that you get that out before the 1st of September. Or you can probably FedEx it or UPS it to the IRS just to make sure that they get that. Oops. Apologize for that slight hiccup. I just accidentally hit the back button on my mouse. So let's go through. All right, so the penalties. Basically, there's a failure to pay penalty, which is generally 0.5% of the outstanding balance for each month or each part of a month that the balance is outstanding. So that accrues until it reaches 25%. That's the maximum that the IRS can accrue in terms of failure to pay penalties. So a little bit more detail about the due date of paying, so that before the penalties increase, generally it's within 21 days of the notice. After that, they'll recalculate the penalties. Um, you can also request a removal or a reduction of penalties. So I get this question a lot, but there are three kind of broad areas where the IRS has discretion to remove or reduce penalties. So the first would be reasonable cause, which is mentioned here. Examples such as a serious illness or an injury, death of a family member, or if you lost your financial records because of a natural disaster. Whether it was one of the recent hurricanes, whether it was one of the LA fires, those are all reasonable cause justifications. So you would file IRS Form 843, which is the claim for refund and request for abatement. So you can do that. If you've never had penalties before, the IRS also has broad discretion to forgive penalties under what's known as a first-time abatement program. And then finally, this verbiage right here says if you requested IRS guidance on a particular tax issue and you requested it in writing, you gave them all the information they needed to make a decision, they made a decision, they sent you written advice, which you relied on for a tax return. If you did all of those and the IRS still penalized you, then you can abate the penalty for following the IRS's advice. So it's not necessarily an automatic thing if you follow your CPA's advice or the person at H&R Block doing your taxes. But if you got a written recommendation from the IRS and you got penalized because you took that recommendation, then you can have the penalties removed. Interest is a little bit more difficult to abate. Generally speaking, there's very limited statutory authority to eliminate interest. However, if you are successful in reducing your tax or your penalty or both, then the IRS will recalculate the interest charges accordingly. So I'm going to take a stab at this balance up here, which is broken down. So let's imagine that this taxpayer owes this tax, but he's able to abate the failure to pay penalty. The IRS would recalculate this 5448, but seeing that the penalty is not nearly as much as the amount owed, this would probably be not much more than a rounding error in terms of the new interest charges. So just to kind of set expectations. Darn it. Sorry. Let's go back to this. And I'm going to go to a link on the last page where you can get more information. So there's a link on how to pay the IRS online. There's a note here saying that the IRS is required to send a copy to both you and your spouse. Each copy has the same information, so only pay the amount due one time. Let's take a look at this notice on the IRS website. It goes to a generic page of the CP501 notice. So I'm not sure the distinction between CP501 and CP501K. There's probably some reference online that I haven't seen yet. But again, there are a lot of click-through options. You can click any of these links depending on the decision you want to make, whether it's paying your balance, whether it's learning more about a particular option, talking about interest, payment penalties. If you need to actually correct your tax return, you'd have to file an amended tax return, and you shouldn't be afraid to do this if that's the right thing to do. Because if you correct your tax return and you reduce your tax, then you'll eventually reduce your penalties and your interest associated with that. So good resources here. We'll go back to the top of this notice and we'll just kind of wrap things up. So we'll put links in the show notes to resources that we've created on the forums mentioned here. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. And if you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another topic that you'd like to see covered in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.